Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us once again for our weekly class. I was listening to the conversation, and people were saying, they need some things during the week to sort of remind them when they are, because the week's so the same every day. Well, at least we know that when we have our class, it's Wednesday, so it gives you a marker during the week of where we are in the week. So thanks all for joining us and being part of that weekly marker, which is always a good thing to have. Okay, so let's start cracking over here. I want to start off today with a interesting quote, and then we'll go into the halacha. And the quote is like this: if you turn to page 119, right? On page 119, the quote is from the Maral. Now, just a little history. The Maral of Prague. What was the Maral known for? The Maral known for his golem. All right, everybody knows the golem of Prague. The golem was this creature that the Maral created out of his Kabbalistic powers, sort of say, and he created out of earth, and he put the name of God on the forehead. And it was a creature that helped the Jewish people in Prague. There's a lot of anti-Semitism, a lot of pogroms going on at the time, right? And he created this to help the Jewish people out. Not to get too sidetracked with the whole history. Did it really happen? Did it not happen? Was it a more myth? Right? There's actually writings in different shuvos regarding halakha questions, more in a theoretical question, not practical. Regarding different halakhic status of what the golem's status is, regarding aminia, regarding what you're allowed to tell him, right? So we do see commentaries 150 years after the Maral lived that do talk about the debate of halakhic debate regarding the golem. So it leads to believe that it actually did happen, and they speak about it. So that's a side point. But the Maral is known for his wisdom, for his teachings, for his depth of knowledge, and he writes over here something very powerful, and I think it's a good way to start today. He says like this: one who understands words of wisdom, right? One who understands the power of words, right, and the wisdom will understand that Lashon Hara is the power of lowliness, right? Power of lowliness, right? What does that mean? What it means is like this: that if you understand what your words could tu'if, as we say, right, could accomplish, could create, the power of words, if you understand the wisdom and the power of what words are, right, then you would never steep so low, right, to say Lashon Hara. But if you don't understand it, right, and you do speak Lashon Hara, right, so then it means to say that you yourself have lowliness. You have no understanding. You yourself have no comprehension of the power, right, of what words could accomplish. Right? And I think it's just a mind-boggling thought from the Maral that we've talked about the power of words, yeah. The Maral is telling us that words. I want to talk about this for a minute. Right? There's a very interesting Mishnah in Pirkei Avos for those that were with us in Pirkei Avos. Right, we probably did this about 3 years ago. Right, the Mishnah says like this. Right, the Mishnah says, what is the difference, Adam, between a man and an animal? Right, so when it speaks about a man, we call it a medaber. Right, how do we identify a human? It doesn't say Adam, it says a medaber, one who speaks. The difference between a man and an animal is a koach hadibur, is the ability to talk, ability to speak. That is the difference between a man and an animal. And what does that mean? Why is that? Right? And the commentaries explain is because the power of speech is not just being able to speak. The ability to formulate a sentence, to be able to, it's noise. Animals also make noise out of their mouth. They go moo, they go eh, they go roof, right? They make different noises, right? But it's not a coherent thing, because the ability to actually create sentences and to formulate your words is a development of the brain. Right? I'm no expert, but there are experts in this, that are kids that are slow to speak or whatever, or other things like that. It's a development in the brain. There's exercises to try to help them out. But it's a development of the brain. It's a sign of intelligence being able to speak. That's why there's a whole push of having a higher vocabulary and things like that, right? It's a sign of intelligence. I think that's a good thing, but we should never, again, make that the only thing, because there's also intelligence in other forms of creation and arts and things like that. And I don't want to get into the whole topic of education right now, right? But it's a sign of intelligence. And that's, where does that come from? Ruach memala. It comes from a higher power, right? I think we started off the class this way, but just bringing it back in, the Targum, when it speaks about man was created, it says, and God blew into man nishmas chayim, a soul of life, right? Neshama, right? The Targum says, right, paraphrasing, koach hadibur, the ability to speak. The ruach mamala, this higher power, and the Targum uses this concept, ruach mamala, this higher power, is koach hadibur, the ability to speak. Our ability to have conversation, our ability to talk, our ability to formulate words is a ruach mamala. It's from a higher power. And that's what we said, and I know I'm repeating a couple of things, but it's important, right? That's what we said, words are a spiritual entity. Right? My hands are physical. Even my eyesight, my seeing, it's from the eyes, right? And we have a whole thing, the way it works, right? My hearing, right? My ear, speaking, right? Talking is a spiritual thing. There's nothing to it. Where does it come from? Okay, there's a voice box. Where does that come from? It's a spiritual thing. And if we can't understand that, and we go ahead and we contaminate it by speaking Lashon Hara, yeah, that's what we're doing. When we speak Lashon Hara, we are contaminating our speech. It's like taking crude oil and pouring into the ocean, contaminating the water. That's what it is. It's exactly what it is. We are contaminating our speech, and that's what the morale is telling us. If we can't understand that, we have a lowliness. We can't comprehend the concept of spirituality. We're lacking something. And so it's sort of just put things in perspective. It's a little harsh, but it's something that has to be said. We have to understand that when we speak Lashon Hara, we are contaminating our power of speech. That's what we're doing. We're contaminating it. And so, yes, we've been talking about how Lashon Hara, you have to have Avat Yisrael, the love of the fellow, right? Not to speak Lashon Hara. Think about your fellow person. And in one of these pages, we're not going to go through it today. Look at the story on page 113, right? It's a beautiful story, right? And the end it shows how much we have to realize if we have Avat Yisrael, right? We'll be able to build our relationship and try not to speak Lashon Hara. And we spoke about a lot of these things, right? We spoke about a lot of these things, and those are true, and they're all true. But another thing that one has to do is a little sharper, because this is about us. Not only are we hurting other people, not only are we creating a rift in the Jewish people, but what we're doing is we're taking Drano, right? We're taking toxins and we're pouring it into our mouth. Now, who would do that? Right? You're not going to go ahead and contaminate your mouth. You're not going to go to the gas station and take the gas thing, and instead of putting it into the gas container, you're going to put it into your mouth and take a squirt. Right? You're not going to do that. Right? Last I checked. I mean, if you do, you need professional help. Right? But we don't do that because we don't want to contaminate our mouths. When we speak Lashon Hara, we have to remind ourselves that we are contaminating our mouths every time we speak Lashon Hara. It's our mouth, our ability to speak, is a ruach mamala. It's a spiritual entity. It's what defines us as human beings. Let's just think about that next time, right? We're ready to give over a juicy piece of information. Next time we want to, be in the crowd or whatever it is, or just schmoozing with your friends and your spouses, even your spouses. Remember, we spoke about lashon hara is also with your spouses, right? You have to be very careful what you say to your spouse and how you say it. So something to think about, that you are contaminating your mouth. Okay, ready to move on? Any questions or comments? Okay, so remind me if I'm wrong, but I think we're on page 110. I don't think we did day 29. Did we? Anybody remember? For some reason, I don't recall. Okay, well, I'll take the silence as we haven't done it yet. So page 29, interesting dilemma.
We didn't do it.
Okay, thank you, Emily. All right.
Sure.
Interesting dilemma, right? It's just an interesting discussion, right? So Shabbos, you bring an out-of-town speaker. We do it all the time in the good old days, right? But you bring an out-of-town speaker, right? His message is a little controversial, and some people are outraged. Right? The situation turns into a firestorm that causes a group to plan to break away minyan. Right? A breakaway minyan. Right? Where they say we're apicarsis, heresy would not be allowed. We're ultra religious. Right? We're not going to let something like this. Right? How could the shul allow such a speaker, such a thing? And there, as just a side point, right? As we are very well aware, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. Right? A lot of people think that they're doing good causes and doing good things in the name of God, right? And in the end, they're really creating tremendous machlokas, and they're creating tremendous problems. Now, I'm not saying that when there's a legitimate cause that you should, right? You have to sometimes, stand up for what you believe, and I'll be the first one to say that, right? If something really bad's happening, you have to stand up and make your point, right? I'm throwing it out there, but one has to really be careful, right? Not to be an instrument of machlokes where it might not be exactly. You're doing it more because it's not up to your level, or it's not because you feel you have a certain feeling or whatever it is, and you don't really have rabbis backing you, or you don't really have sort of your own hargasha, your own feeling. One has to be very careful. And a lot of machlokes, a lot of breakaways, and a lot of things start off with a feeling, a hargasha, and then it turns into a whole philosophy. All right, so one has to be really careful about it. But that's not the discussion today. The question's like this. You, Mr. Chaim Yankel, our buddy Chaim Yankel, right? Mr. Chaim Yankel, or Yankel Pfefferkorn, we'll use Chaim Yankel this time, right? Mr. Chaim Yankel, right, is friends with both sides of the camp, right? With both leaders, right? We got, Moshe on one side, we got Yanki on one side, right? And Chaim Yankel is in the middle. He's friends with both of them, right? He plays golf with both guys, right? And now his question's like this, right? He could try to, right? He tried to quell the rebellion, even though he will surely hear an earful of abuse about the other person, right? He'll hear lashon hara, right? Moshe will speak about Yankel. Oh, Yankel is such a rooster. He's such a terrible. How can he do this? How can he? And Yankel will say about Moshe, what, he's creating machlekes. How can he do this? It wasn't so bad. Okay, so I won't bring speakers like this. But you have to. And he goes and he'll hear lashon hara on both sides, right? He'll hear lashon hara or achilas, right? Either the truth, or a lot of times it turns into achilas, so it's not the truth, right? So is he allowed to put himself in a situation where he's going to hear lashon hara? Right. So to make it a little more practical, right? That you're a good friend, and either two friends are fighting with each other, which happens unfortunately, right? There was a misunderstanding, or there was a this, or there was a that, couples, and you're trying to mediate. You're trying to be that friend that's going to mediate, right? Number one, once you'd always be very careful when they're being the mediator, because a lot of times what happens is the two friends make up, but they make up by ganging up on you because you're the one that's sticking your nose in, and it might not be the right place for you to stick in. So you have to really be careful. Right? Just an eitz tova, a good piece of advice. Right? I'm not saying not to, right? But a good piece of advice that one has to be very careful when they do stick their nose in, that it's done in the proper way, and it's the people want, right, to be helped. right? And not that it's going to end up that you're the one that's going to be the one that's left out, which unfortunately happens a lot of times. But that's a side point. We're doing a lot of side points today. I mean, that's a side point, right? The question over here is halachically, you're not worried about that. But halachically, can you go in, right, to try to break up the machlokas? So the halacha is like this. Right? The Chafetz Chaim says, right, that to break up a machlokas, right, there's nothing greater than that. Right? There's nothing greater than breaking up a machlokas. So let me read you the words of the Chafetz Chaim inside. That the Mightier Sumuto Sapalash Har Bala Machlokas Dafkim who Roa Salideshi Galafne Anashim as a Gada Tumis Bezainian. View Shain Adin even Metuchzet to Shabach Machlokas. Ava Balav Haki ain't some Chilik Bedover. Right? One has to be very careful, right? To say that Bali Machlokas will come out to make sure that it's taken care of, right? And especially that was something that's dividing a community, right? You're allowed to listen to Lashon Hara to try to make peace, right? Ein davar omed lefnei shalom. There's nothing that stands in the way of peace. And that's not completely true. There is, right? But one has to be very careful. Peace is a tremendous thing. Shalom, peace, right, is a tremendous concept in Judaism. And I want to take it a little deeper. Because if you think about it, we keep on talking about that Lashon Hara, the root of Lashon Hara, right, is that it creates animosity amongst people. Right? You say something about someone else and they hear about it, and now they say, oh, you spoke about that person, or what someone else said. It creates a machlokas. It creates sinas chinam, hatred. And so when you are trying to accomplish of getting rid of that machlokas, and you might have to hear someone else, but if you're going in with the intentions of getting rid of machlokas, so you're not going to go ahead and take what the other person said and take it to the other person and say, well, you know what the other guy told about you. You're not helping the machlokas. On the contrary, you're putting fuel on the fire, right? So if you are a person that's actually trying to cure all the machlokas, to get rid of the argument, to get rid of the disagreement, right? So then your whole intention is to make peace. The whole concept of Lashon Hara is that it's trying to create fighting amongst people, sinas chinam. So therefore, you are allowed to go in, again, as long as you keep with the parameters that we spoke about beforehand, all the rules, right? But you're allowed to go in and listen, right? And try to say, no, that's not really what happened. Let's talking to the person to try to change the narrative, right? And try to bring the two people together, right? Because you're not going to go ahead, if that's your intentions, you're not going to go ahead and start saying to the other person, well, you know what the other guy said about you. You know what the other guy said about you. And that's just going to blow up the whole thing. So you're not creating peace. You're creating a larger machlokas, right? So therefore, right, one could possibly make peace to try to do so, right? And as the previous instance, you have to make sure that, you know, you're working within the defined laws of Toelas. And over here, they give a very important warning. Right, must be the effort must be defined by the Rav to ensure that that fuel isn't added to the fire. Because as I said, right, one wrong little thing, right, one wrong little way of saying a smirk, right, when the other person talks about you and say, like, what, boom, you can be adding fuel to the fire, and then your whole effort could actually come back to bite you, right? Because you're the one that's now adding fire. I want to add on another thing. Talk about machlokas for a second. Machlokas is fire in itself. Right? When there's a disagreement amongst people, right, and especially in a community, right, that's dividing the community or different ways of seeing things, right, it is a fire within itself, and one, especially one who's trying to, especially one who's trying to get rid of the machlokas, try to help make the peace. He has to realize that he's inserting himself. He has to be like a firefighter. He has to put on special clothing to go in, because he's inserting himself into a fire. And even if you have good intentions, unfortunately, you might get burnt. Like we spoke about, a friend that's trying to get two friends to talk to each other. What might happen is that you're the one that's going to get burned. because machlokes is a fire, and it's fires that are if they're not controlled, they're let loose, and it doesn't make a difference if you started the fire, didn't start the fire, right? You're going to get burnt, right? Chaim Shmulevitz talks about this idea many times, right? That there are certain things that are fires, and something that's a fire doesn't make a difference if you have good intentions or if you have bad intentions, of course, but it doesn't make a difference if you have good intentions. You still might get burnt up, and therefore I'm not, God forbid, trying to scare people from inserting themselves in and trying to help people. On the contrary, I think it's very important. If you have the ability, you have the responsibility. Right? We talked about this many times. People that have the ability and they have their responsibility, and if they just shy away, nah, it's not me, they're not living up to their responsibility. That's a terrible thing. Right? If you have ability, then you have a responsibility, right? You have the obligation to do that. But there is a strong warning there. One has to be very careful that it's done very delicately, done in a way that's according to the Torah, and you should consult with a rabbi or someone that knows how to deal with certain situations, because you don't want to end up being burnt. And if you're going to get burnt, and you know you're going to get burnt, so then you're probably not obligated to do it, because so the shift is going to go from this two people in machlokas, and you're involved in it, and then you didn't gain anything, right? So a rabbi should be consulted, should be talked to, right, before one is trying to squirrel machlokas, because it's done. People try to be the good doer, right? Oh, I'm going to get these people to, and then what happens? Either they talk and this person's the fight, or it just blows up and becomes even a bigger machlokas. And because the way they do it, to try to get other people and this and that, and talk about, oh, look, that's not really, the other person doesn't really feel the way you think, and then you mess up, and it creates a bigger machlokas. And machlokas is a fire. Right? To show how far the machlokas is a fire, right? And then we'll move on. Right? We know where is the first machlokas that we find in the Torah. First time that sort of the Torah really talks about machlokas. Where is it? It's Korah. Right? Pirkei Avos says machlokas lo l'shem shamayim, an argument that's not for the sake of heaven, is Korah. Right? Korah, that's machlokas, the first time. What was Korach's punishment? Korach's punishment was to be swallowed up completely. No remnants, no nothing. Swallowed up. No burial, no nothing. No levaya, right? No funeral, nothing. Just swallowed up. Boom, gone. 1 second is here, 1 second is gone. And the commentaries ask, why did this have to be the punishment? And there's many different answers, many different thoughts, right? And it had to be an extreme punishment, because Moses said, if they die like a normal person, then I'm not the one that got sent. But if they die in a weird way, then I am. He didn't say it had to be that the earth swallowed them up. It could have been other weird ways. I mean, it was a desert. Hail could have come and plopped them on their heads and killed them. Right? I don't know. Right? It would have been a weird way. And then they could have had a burial and things like that. Why did it have to be that the earth swallowed them up? And it says it didn't only swallow them, it swallowed all their possessions, their tents and everything. There was no remnants of Korah. And I heard this beautiful idea once, and I don't recall where, probably at a talk in Israel between Mincha and Ma'ariv by some rabbi, and I'm lucky that I heard this part, because the rest I probably fell asleep on, right? But I heard this beautiful idea. He says, because as we were explaining, machlokas is fire. And everybody knows that in fire, until every part of the fire is out, every coal is not red anymore. It's ashes. Right? The fire could always start up again. And that's how fires work, right? We make a barbecue, right? Oh, the fire's out. No. Let's we blow it up. Blow it. Oh, we got the fire again, right? Because fire, and the way fire works is, even though you don't see it, right? But it could be cooking, right? It could be cooking, right, inside, and the coal, right, the piece of wood, right, whatever, and it could just start all over again. You have to make sure every part of the fire is completely out. And therefore, machlokas, to show how far the Torah holds, Hashem holds, machlokas considered like a fire. Machlokas is like a fire. God said, I need to get every aspect of Korach out of here. The Jewish people, they have to make sure that they understand that machlokas is fire, right? And there can't be any ability for this machlokas to start up again. to question Moshe's leadership, to try to have new leaders, right? To try to create a new sect of Judaism, right? That's not following Moshe. God said, that's it, completely out. You got to eradicate it completely. Can't have that they're buried in the ground. Can't have that they have a funeral. Can't have that their possessions are divided by their family members. Boom. I need a way that everything is completely out. How do we do that? They all get swallowed up. All their possessions, everything, boom, gone. Because that's machlokas. Machlokas is fire, right? And that's why one of the ideas, right, that all of it has to be completely eradicated. Okay, let's move on. Any questions or comments? Okay, so let's move on to the next halacha. Right. Okay, page day 30, page 112. Okay, so this is an interesting question. And again, this is something that could come up often. Your friend is thinking of buying a big house, right? Big house, 5 bedrooms, and indoor, outdoor pool, right? Tennis courts. Okay, I'm dreaming. Big house, and he cannot. I don't know why I even said tennis court. I don't play tennis. All right, and he cannot really afford. All right, he cannot really afford it. You have a relative who did exactly that, and the result was a financial stress, which turned into a marital stress and ultimately into a heart attack at an early age. Okay, they're really putting it all out there, even if it didn't turn into a heart attack. Right? But it created a lot of stress in the house. It created a lot of financial stress. The father wasn't home; he was working triple shifts and whatever it is, and it turned into a whole balagan. All right, trying to make life more nicer with the whole thing, with the jacuzzi and whatnot, right? And became a whole balagan. Even if not, let's say a regular house, he's trying to upgrade from a 2-bedroom to a 4-bedroom, right? Whatever the situation is, right? Wanting to buy a new car, right? Whatever it is, someone wants to take on something that could be hurtful for them, right? And may you tell your friend a story that he may learn from a relative's mistake, right? You had a certain relative that made the same mistake, right? Did the same thing, right? Or a good friend, and relative, good friend, someone that you know, and now you want to tell this other person, hey, listen, I'm not telling you what to do, right? But let me just tell you, right? I know, right, that Yankel Pfefferkorn, right? He did a similar thing, right? And his life turned upside down. He thought he was getting a nicer car. He thought he was going to be a better house and have more space and things like that. But all that more space has created more headache and it's created bigger problems, right? He thought he was going to go on this big vacation, take the whole family and whatever it is, and they're going to go on a cruise, and it is a kosher cruise, of course, right? And they're going to go here and go there, right? And it ended up that it just didn't work out the way he planned. And I just want to let you know that just double check your finances and things like that. Are you allowed to tell the friend it's a toelis, it's for a purpose, right? The person, he made a mistake and you're trying to learn from that mistake. Are you allowed to do that? So
just leave out the name.
Okay, good. Very good, Emily. Leave out the name. And I was going to say that. Very good. Good. Very good. All right. Leave out the name. But let's say before we leave out the name, are you allowed to say the name? You think it's going to make a bigger impact, right? You leave out the name sometimes, and we all know this, right? When you leave out the name, not necessarily that this story ever happened. You're just making up a story, right, to try to make the person teach a lesson, right? So when you leave out, not saying that it didn't happen, right? But when you leave out a name, if you make a name, the person could look it up and say, Chaim Yanko over there, right? Chaim Yanko, you see how why he's all stressed. You know why he had that heart. You know why? It's because what he tried to do, and so it has a greater impact. You're right. Right? If you leave out the name, right, and I want to add on one more point. We'll get back to that in 1 second. Let's just see what they say, and then we'll get back to your point, Emily. Right? You may use other people's mistakes as an example to help someone else learn a valuable lesson, provided that the story is well known in any case. However, in all previous instances of the speaker for a constructive purpose, you must work with the laws of the circumstances to make sure that it follows Toelas, right? Those rules, right? Now, we spoke about a similar concept, if you remember, right? About a certain Rebbe. This is going back a couple of weeks, probably a couple of months ago, a month and a half ago, something like that. Right? You want to use an example of a certain person that when they were younger, they weren't very learned, they got into mischief, and now he turned himself around and became a rabbi, he became a good business person, he became a good person in the community, he learns every day, right? He goes to work, he's a healthy person. And you want to try to show students or some kids, hey, look, don't give up. Just because you're having a hard time now doesn't mean to say that you can't turn around. So we spoke about a similar situation. It was a similar concept. Right? Over there, was even more. Over there, you're trying to give a compliment, using the person as, look, he's turned around, he's doing okay now. Over here, we're saying, look, he had a heart attack. Right? The guy made it just complete botch of his life. All right, don't do that. All right, so it's not a compliment. You're just using the guy's mistake. Right? And the scenario we said beforehand is even a bigger scenario where you're giving the guy a compliment. Look what the guy is. He's a healthy person in society. He's the gabbai in the shul, right? He learns every day. He gives a daf yomi shir, right? He's a healthy. He gives charity, right? He's a good person in the community, right? So you're giving a compliment, but through the compliment, you're saying, but you know how he was as a teenager, right? Everyone's like, oh, where this guy going to end up, right? But he turned around, and you could do that. And so through the compliment, you're talking negative about the person. And so over there, your intentions are for a compliment, also a lesson. But again, negativity is coming out. And over here, there is only negative, right? But it's for a talis, it's for a purpose. So the rule is still the same, right? Even in this scenario, and that's why I'm saying, even in this scenario where it's all negative, if it's a known story, if it's something that's known, everybody knows, right? And he talks about it, right? And he's like, and everybody in the community knows Chaim Yankel, right? He tried to up himself in status in the community. He got this fancy car, he got this house, or whatever it is. He tried to go on a big vacation and flew up in his face, right? Everybody knows it, right? So then you're allowed to say it because, again, as long as it fits out, firsthand, and all the other rules. You have good intentions and all the other rules, right? Because then it's a known thing. And you're not saying it out of malicious, you're saying it out of your intentions are to help the other person. But if it's not a known thing, so then you're not allowed to say anything. So then what do? So then we're back to the scenario of what Emily said, the answer that Emily said, right? Leave out the name. If you leave out the name, so then you're just talking about a story, you're not talking about an individual. There's a caveat to that. You have to make sure that when you say the story, even if you leave out the name, right? You have to make sure that there's no way for the person to figure out who it is. They say, "Listen, I know a guy, right? When I lived in in a small town, right? And he did this and he did that. I'm not saying the name, and there's only 15 Jews in the community, right? And it's very easy to find out who it was, right? Or even in the community, your own community, right? And you say, I know this guy, whatever it is, and the guy, not necessarily, people don't really know the story, but he starts figuring it out. And say, 1 second, so which guy just bought a house, right? Oh, there's 3 people that just bought a house in the community, right? Okay, so which guy had a heart attack? Oh, it's that guy that had a heart attack. Oh, it's that guy that is. So then you can start, if you give too much information that the person can figure out who it is, that's as if you're saying the name. And so this is very important in general, right? Unless a lot of times people say, well, I'm just not going to say the name, right? I just want to tell you what happened, right? I'm not going to tell you the name, right? But if it's very easy, right? Even if it's not so easy, but it's possible. Right? If the person, it's not so easy, it's not possible, the person happens to go crazy and figure out and look at the details, whatever it is, and he figures out, not necessarily is that your fault, right? But if you are laying down too many clues, or it's something that will be obvious who it is, right? So then, right, you're not allowed to say. So let's say the story with the babysitters, if you remember, right? You want to tell your friend about a babysitter. I don't want to tell you who the babysitter was, right? But now it's a girl, right? And it just came late from school, from college. Now it has to be a college girl, right? Now how many college girls do we have in this community, right? You're already limiting the whole thing. She came late and this, that, and she drove in her. She's starting to give too much details, right, in the story, which makes the story geschmack and juicy, right? But giving those details allows the person to not figure out who it is, or at least limited to one or two people, which is almost the same thing as knowing who it is. And so you have to be very careful, even when you don't. I tell this to my kids all the time when they're saying a story that happened in school. Right? I said, be very careful not to say the name. And also, unless we have to know and we have to go speak to the principal or whatever it is, or call the parents, right? And then don't say it at the supper table. Just come and tell us directly. Right? But otherwise, if it's the same story, be very careful. Try not to say the gender, right? Because how many there's X amount of kids in your class or X amount of kids in the whole school, right? And try not to say the gender. Try not to give other examples, right? Oh, no, so tall, right? Or so short. Or okay, how many kids in your class are taller than you or shorter than you? Right? So you have to be very careful. And again, this is back to thinking. We have to be very careful to be aware of the details that we give, because the details that we give could lead to the person figuring out who it is. So even if we don't give the name, right, which is always much better, right? But we have to make sure that we don't inadvertently allow the person to figure out who it is. Okay, we're going to stop here today, a couple of minutes early, but we just finished this this section, right? We're going to start a new section, and that is, oh no, second. Oh no, let's do one more day. Sorry, one more day. Then we finish. They just had it's weird. They have okay one way of paying for the book. So skip a couple of pages to page 118. Let's just get this, and then we'll finish chapter 2. So another similar situation: a woman calls you for information about a young man, right, or a young woman, right, who has been suggested for potential shidduch for her daughter. Your son, shidduch is a match, right? Your son knows the boy from yeshiva, right, from school, and has described him several times as a inconsiderate boy, right? May you mention this information, right? So your son, which is in and itself lashon hara, right? But your son comes home from yeshiva sometimes, or it's like, this guy is so inconsiderate. He's always butting the line. He's always, always hogging things. Always this. He's just an inconsiderate guy, right? So, which is wrong for the boy to tell the mother that, unless there was a toelis, a purpose for it, right? But otherwise, whatever it is, but you got your information secondhand. Are you allowed to give over the information? Right? So the answer is heresy, which is the negative information that you've heard from someone else, may not be repeated. Remember, we talked about this is one of the criteria of toelis. Right? You may only repeat what you've witnessed yourself, toelis. Even then, you must be absolutely sure that you understand the context of what you've seen. Right? So, number one, and this is, you're not allowed to. We've been saying a lot of things that you are allowed to and how to do it. Right? In this scenario, you're not allowed to. Oh, but it's a girl, it's a boy, it's a shidduch, it's a match. Right? I just want to make sure that they have everything clear. You don't know this for sure. Right? Your son told you, or a friend said something. They might have, especially a feeling like this, they might have felt that the person was being inconsiderate, but maybe your son wasn't, right? Maybe there was a reason. Maybe he had to run to a doctor, and therefore he was trying to get his lunch before he had to run out, or whatever it is. It could be a million things. Maybe he had to go visit his mother in the hospital, right? Who knows, right? And therefore he was running and he didn't realize, and he stepped on your son's toe, right? So now this person's, inconsiderate. It could be a million. You're not there, you didn't see it, and you're hearing it secondhand, so you have no clue. So you can't, oh, my my son will never say something bad about someone if it's not true. Too bad. I don't care, right? You're not allowed to repeat it over. And so this is something very important. This happens, unfortunately, too often. Right? I heard it on good authority. Right? How many times do we hear those words? I've heard it on good authority. If you've heard it on good authority, do not repeat. Because I don't care how good of authority it is. It's called secondhand. Called secondhand. So what do? You say, listen, I don't know the kid. You can call my son and ask him. My son knows. He was in yeshiva with him. Speak to my son. Now, the son is firsthand. Now, the son himself has to make sure that he follows the rules. Right? But the son is firsthand. Right? If you want, the other person might say, no, it's fine. I'll speak to the rabbis and things like that. Right? But you say, listen, I don't know the boy. Sorry. Right? you want more information, speak to my son. I don't know the boy firsthand. Never came to my house, never this, never that. I don't know the guy. There's no need to try to feel that to give everybody information. All right? And again, hearing it on good authority is not kosher for Lashon Hara. Secondhand information. Now, if you say, I heard a good authority that there's a sale going on, in Macy's, go for it. Right? If you heard there's a good authority that, Walmart is having a certain thing or Target or whatever it is, go for it. That's, you could, hearing a good authority is good. Right? But for Lashon Hara, speaking about other people, this is so important. I'm glad I remember this one more day, and sort of fits in what we're speaking about. Hearing on good authority is not kosher for Lashon Hara. So it's not kosher. You have to see or hear it firsthand of what happened. Okay, thank you all for joining us. We're going to end the recording. Feel free to unmute yourself.